Last week, I predicted that Thursday night's debate wouldn't have much of an impact on the election. Well, obviously, I was wrong on that. My thinking was that, there were very low expectations for President Biden. I assumed he would meet them, but he didn't. And the end result was a significant loss of credibility for the White House, Biden's campaign staff, and Democratic-leaning media outlets. They had been claiming that all those videos showing Biden looking lost and wandering off were cheap fakes, that they were promoted by Trump supporters. Well, the debate showed that President Trump and his team were right, and it's likely that voters will treat some of Trump's other claims more seriously now. So what does it all mean? Well, before the debate, President Trump was a modest favorite to win the White House. He has now solidified his advantage and is the clear favorite in November. The CNN post-debate poll showed very few voters actually changed their minds during the debate, but Biden was already trailing. Any slippage at all can doom his campaign. Along the way, it wouldn't surprise me if Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gets a bounce in the polls. It's easy to imagine a number of Democratic-leaning voters who detest Trump deciding they can't vote for Biden either. That would be a little bit like 1980 when 7% of voters cast their ballots for John Anderson. That helped Ronald Reagan defeat Jimmy Carter. Now, as for the Democrats, there are a few good options. If they stick with Biden, and if his performance doesn't improve, election 2024 will likely be a good night for the GOP. On the other hand, it's far from clear that replacing Biden would be any better. The fight for the nomination would be brutal. It would likely divide the party. Some say Vice President Harris is the logical choice, but many other Democrats see her as an especially weak candidate. If not Harris, who? Well, in practical terms, a centrist candidate would have the best chance of winning in November, but probably couldn't be nominated in today's Democratic Party. That's because progressive Democrats dominate the party's activist base, and they would likely embrace a candidate with views far outside the American mainstream. Regardless of which path the Democrats take, Donald Trump would remain the clear favorite in November. It'll take a few weeks, by the way, to sort out whether this will also have an impact on Senate and congressional races. We'll be taking a look at the Senate races a little bit later in the show. Other than a dramatically improved performance from President Biden, the best hope for Democrats would be a dramatically improved economy. And that's something else we'll be discussing much later in today's show. But the bottom line is, last night made a lot of Democrats nervous, partly because of the performance, partly because of what we expect to see in the polls. But I think the greatest reason for them being nervous is there are no positive paths forward. It is difficult to see a way out. Those are my thoughts.
Really, it's too early to tell whether or not Thursday's debate is going to have that much of a difference in the presidential voting. But what's great about our country is we've got checks, we've got balances. And one of those is the Senate. And so right now, let's take a look at that, Scott, see where we are standing at this point.
Well, let's begin with a very basic fact that only 1/3 of the seats in the Senate are up for re-election. That was a brilliant check and balance in our constitutional order. Because, if the popular opinion just sways one way or the other in a single election, the founders set up a system where you got to keep it going. That's right. After 3 elections, you can gain control of the Senate. But right now, the Republicans start with 38 seats who are not being contested. Democrats, 28 seats.
So if you think about that, just the numbers, it shows you that they've got a leg up to start with.
This is why they always talk about it being a good map for one team or the other. Now, we also then have what we call our gimmies.
Mm-hmm. So what are those gimmies for Trump?
These are gimmies. If you look at all the red states here, pretty easy. The only thing that's changing on this map, the only difference, is here in West Virginia. West Virginia is Joe Manchin's seat, been a Democratic seat for a long time, but in presidential voting and everything not named Manchin, it's been a Republican place for a long time. Republicans pick up that, they're at 48. Democrats pick up all these seats, they're at 40. Then there are 3 states that we say are toss-ups. Now, I got to be clear about this. We're putting these as toss-ups just out of an abundance of caution. Democrats think they can win Texas. Ted Cruz won against Beto O'Rourke 6 years ago in a massive Democratic wave year. They're not going to have a good year like that overall for the Democrats.
Okay. I'm here. I live here. I grew up here. And quite frankly, Democrats are running a good candidate, but that's not changing.
That's right. Florida. Democrats believe that Governor DeSantis is now becoming less popular somehow. And, you know, that's just what they want to believe it. Rick Scott has said some controversial things. It would be a major shock if that doesn't happen. And in New Mexico, this is the flip side of it.
Yeah.
You know, both teams think, oh, man, we can win this. But it's so far down the food chain for the national parties, it's not going to be much of a contest at this point. But we put these three here because something might change, so we at least want to keep an eye on them.
Okay.
But then you get to 7 toss-up states. Before we get here, I want you to look at where the map is. Republicans are at 50, Democrats at 43. That means 2 things. Donald Trump wins, Republicans already control the Senate because it'd be a tie and the vice president.
And anything that you see here in yellow, Republicans just have to pick up 1.
That's right. That's right. Now, all 7 of these yellow states are currently held by a Democratic senator. And in not a single one of them is the Republican challenger ahead.
But.
So, well, there's a couple places here, a couple of buts. Let's start with 2 states where the Democrats have an incumbent, but Donald Trump is likely to win the state big. Starting here in Montana. You know, John Tester's a very popular guy. 6 years ago in 2018, again, that big Democratic year, he won by 3 points. Donald Trump won the state by 16. He's likely to win it by maybe 20 points or more this year.
So that's a tough one. You don't think he's making past it?
You know, it's close. I would guess this probably goes to the Republicans, but Tester's a good candidate, very popular, so we're not sure on that one.
And then?
Ohio. Well, when you get to Ohio, you know, Senator Brown, very popular, got a populist tinge. Ohio, Donald Trump is going to win. He's going to win it fairly comfortably, but it's not Montana. I'd feel very safe saying the Republicans pick up at least 1 out of Montana and Ohio, but Montana is more likely. You know, I do think this ends up going back to Brown as the incumbent, and they keep the seat.
So what are the toss-ups?
Well, there's 3 states that are toss-ups in the presidential race that have a Democratic incumbent: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Nevada. All 3 of those are uphill battles. And so if we start here in Wisconsin, you know, look, this is a state Tammy Baldwin won big last time.
She's
it's
a
going
good
to be
candidate.
close. Good candidate. It's going to be a close race.
Okay, let's see.
Let's see if we can do this. If you go to Michigan, now this is a little different. No incumbent in Michigan. Open race, stepping down. You know, in the presidential race, we're saying it's a toss-up. It's very close in the polls. You have to assume there's a little bit of a Democratic lean going into that, but this is really a pure toss-up at this point. But then you go to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, and remember how close it was last time around.
Well, close in the presidential race.
Right.
2 years ago, Republicans lost with Dr. Oz. Again, this is an uphill fight. Republicans certainly can be competitive. McCormick's a good candidate. Probably not going to move in that direction.
And then you've got a couple of very interesting states because they're open.
That's right. Well, Arizona is open, and Sinema became very famously independent and contrarian. She's stepping down. You know, this is a state that Donald Trump is leading in the polls. He's likely to win, or he's at least favored to win in the presidential sweepstakes, 4 or 5 points. Carrie Lake.
She's running way below him.
Right. She's running about 10 points behind Trump. She's charismatic. She ran 2 years ago, but she has penchant for saying some controversial things. So we're not sure. This one, you know, probably leaning Democrat at this point in time. And that leaves us to Nevada. You got a Democratic incumbent, won by 5 points 6 years ago. This one, again, I think is in the pure toss-up category. Right now, Nevada is leaning in Trump's direction.
Leaning.
But Nevada's a state that Democrats always, it's one of the hardest states to poll. Democrats always seem to have a good ground game, get people
And you've
out.
got a large union presence, obviously,
That's right,
in Nevada
exactly.
as well.
So with all that said and done, we are at a place where the Republicans, if the map plays out like we see it right now, would have 51 seats. Democrats would have 47. Nevada and Michigan will be in that toss-up category. A lot of these are very close, so we'll check in, you know, every month or so.
But key is that you start with 38 for the Republicans and 28 for the Democrats. So
That's right. That's right.
easier.
It is a little bit easier. And then, you know, that Joe Manchin flip with him stepping down, and that makes that seat very easy for Republicans. But look, we can talk about individual races. We can talk about presidential debates. The biggest issue that we face in this election and every election is the economy. James Carville had it right way back in 1992. It's the economy, stupid. It is always the driving force that sets the baseline. When we ask voters right now, how do you rate the economy? Is it getting better or worse? The numbers are pretty pessimistic. 26% say it's getting better. 52% say it's getting worse. Now that's the economy in general, so that's maybe not the best indicator. We ask people, how do you rate your own personal finances? 39% are telling us that it's good or excellent. So what does that tell us?
Good for you.
Yeah, well, that's down 10 points from when Joe Biden took office. It's up 9 points from the fall of last year. So, you know, it's not quite as bad for him as it was, but these are terrible numbers if you're an incumbent.
You're good at the numbers. I'm good at figuring out whether I've got a pit in my stomach or not, you know? And it's that gut feeling you get of whether your town feels like it's doing well,
Right.
or your family is doing well, or, you know, if you're saying, should I go out to dinner, you know, on Friday and Saturday night, or, you know, hey, we can cook at home and make a big bowl of pasta. Right. You know, it's those little things that people feel at home that really tells you so much.
One of the things that always shocks people in Washington when you go to make a presentation, you'll say, what happens when the price of gas goes up? And the experts are thinking, well, people will buy more fuel-efficient cars. No, the number one thing people do when the price of gas goes up is they buy fewer groceries because it comes out of the same pot.
Yeah.
You've only got a certain amount of disposable income. Now, the most important number, and I've been selling this story for a very long time, you and I've talked about it for a long time.
I know.
Is are your personal finances getting better or worse? Because, you know, we don't think about how am I doing in some theoretical sense. That pit of your stomach feeling is, are things getting better for me or worse?
Yeah.
Right now, 23% of voters tell us their finances are getting better. 38% say that they're getting worse. That's a net negative 15. Doesn't take a numbers geek to realize those aren't great numbers. What's really bad for the Biden team is that that net number is a little bit worse than it was in January. The worse that gets, the worse Biden's chances get. Now, I got to tell you the other side, though, because people that are rooting for Donald Trump don't like to think that there's another side. If people begin to feel less bad about their finances, that will be a very big boost. What people experience in their lives is far more important than what they hear political people say. You know, if you go into a McDonald's and you don't receive good service, you don't sit there and analyze, was it the manager who didn't have enough staffing, or was it something? You just say, I'm not going there anymore.
I had to DQ.
Yeah, so that's right. And so that's the response.
Yeah.
If things aren't getting better, they're going to say, we're going to try the other guy.
Now, we want to turn our attention, though, to my favorite part, which is Ask the Pollster. So what you do is grab your device, your phone or whatever, and there's a little QR code in the bottom there. You've just got to scan that, and then you can send in basically any question you want for Scott. He is your tool to use. And
I
so,
like asking questions more than answering them, but okay, we'll do that.
So I went into the mailbag and we got a really good question. It was, how many people trust mainstream news today?
Not a whole lot, and they don't trust any of the journalistic outlets. We asked a question about, would a reporter be more interested in reporting the news accurately or in helping their favorite candidate? Just 28% think they would report the news accurately. Twice as many say, of course, they're going to help their favorite candidate. That's what they do. So that's a high level of cynicism.
It really is.
That's right. Which is why there's Merit Street Media.
I know. We're going to be straight with you, you know? Okay, let's turn to 4th of July because we got Independence Day. How are Americans feeling about the country, 4th of July, celebrating?
52% say it's one of the most important holidays in our nation. This is a time when people actually do kind of the traditional things, watch fireworks, go to parades. It is a day that brings America together in a lot of ways. And one reason for that, 91% are proud to be an American.
I certainly am.
Me too.
I mean, when you look at the alternatives, thank goodness we are here.
Yes.
And what's interesting to me is that it wasn't really right off the bat. It wasn't until like 1812, after that war, that Americans started celebrating the 4th of July as what we know today.
Yes, well, and again, this won't shock anybody in the 21st century. There was a partisan difference in the earliest days. You had one party, the Federalists, supported the Constitution. That's what they celebrated. The other party, Thomas Jefferson's group, celebrated the Declaration of Independence. That's what, July 4th. And by the way, it was actually signed on July 2nd, and John Adams thought that would be the day that would go down as the founding of our nation.
We'll get it together as a nation at some point. All right, what is the number not to forget this week?
The one number not to forget this week, 25%. Only 25% of voters nationwide say their income is keeping up with inflation. That's why the economy is the #1 issue in every opinion poll.